Thank you, Mackenzie. Hi, everyone. I think many of you now know me from all the office-wide orientations. My name is Neelam Patel. I'm the team lead for training and technical assistance at the Office on Violence Against Women. And thank you for joining us for our last office-wide webinar today. Today's webinar is with the Office Inspector General Audit Office. And today our presenters are Elizabeth Smith and Marie Evangelist. Thank you all so much.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
All right. First, I just want to do a quick check. Can everyone see my screen? All right, great. Well, thank you. As Neelam said, my name is Elizabeth Smith. I'm with the Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General. I'm the Audit Division. I've been with the Audit Division for about, 16 years now. In about the past 8 or 9 years, I have had a particular focus on audits of grant programs within the Department of Justice. Marie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Elizabeth. My name is Marie Evangelist. I'm the Assistant Regional Audit Manager in Philadelphia out of our Philadelphia Regional Audit Office. I've worked in the federal government for 20 years now, and for the last 15, I've been with the Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General. And similar to Elizabeth, I've spent a great deal of the past close to a decade working on similar external audits and crime victims fund specifically, but we've done a bunch in the OVW space, and I'm looking forward to explaining this process to you today. Thanks.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So for those who are not familiar, the Office of the Inspector General works within the Department of Justice to detect and deter waste, fraud, abuse, and misconduct within DOJ programs and by DOJ personnel. And that includes any funding that is given out by the Department of Justice. So that includes grants or contracts, any other forms of financial assistance. And we really work to promote economy and efficiency within all of these programs. As you may see on the screen, there's a link there to our hotline where you can go and report fraud, waste, and abuse. At any time that there might be anything that might pop up. I believe you all had a similar webinar with our investigations office where they may have spoken about grant fraud as well. So that may have been covered previously. So that is who we are. There is an inspector general in every government agency. So we're not alone here, right? There are others, in Department of Education and HHS and all those other government agencies as well. But Marie and I are here representing the Department of Justice OIG. So up on the screen, I have the Department of Justice org chart. I won't go through every box, but what this is this represents all of the purview that the Department of Justice OIG has. So we have oversight responsibility for all programs, all contracts, and all grants within the Department of Justice. So this is everybody from the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Bureau of Prisons, to the grant-making components within the department. So as you'll see on this slide, this kind of shows where the grant making components flow from. So from the Attorney General through the Deputy Attorney General, Associate Attorney General, down to the 3 grant making components within the department. So there's the Office of Justice Programs, the COPS Office, and then OVW, which you are all familiar with. And so these are the 3 components that give out grant funds within the department. So as the OIG, we can look at any of the grant funds that are given out from these components and provide oversight and auditing of those grants. Up on the screen now, I have a map of the United States, and this shows the breakdown of how we assign responsibility for grant oversight from the audit division. So there are 6 regional offices that each have a variety of states in our purview that we have responsibility for. Marie mentioned she's from the Philadelphia office, which has the Northeast region. I can't recall if I mentioned I'm from the Chicago office, so the 9 Midwestern states there. But we have auditors in each of these regions that provide oversight to those regions. And with that, I'll hand it over to Marie to cover the phases of our audits.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So This would be considered the bread and butter of this presentation, where Elizabeth and I are going to walk you through each of the phases of the grant award audit. You can see on the screen, but I'm going to read them each off, and then I will talk to you about each of these phases. So first, we're going to discuss the notification of the audit, then the entrance conference. We'll talk about field work, which includes both a programmatic review of your program as well as a financial review of the program. We're going to discuss the exit conference, the draft report, the final report, and then audit resolution and closure. So it's going to be a lot. We know there's likely going to be questions related to everything that we're discussing here. So we are happy to have those questions answered. We ask that you use that question and answer function if you would like to ask us any questions about anything we have included here today. I'll preface this with if at any time your organization or entity is selected for an audit, the auditors that are working with you will go over this process again in great detail. So don't feel like you need to write copious notes about everything that we're saying here today. If you are in the position that you are going to have an audit, everything will be discussed again during that process, and you are welcome to reach out to your grant manager, anyone from your awarding agency, and they will walk you through this process as well. So we'll get it started. Elizabeth, you don't mind the next slide. So the start of the grant audit. So the first phase is the notification of the audit. So generally what will happen is that someone from the OIG, would be likely the auditor in charge or someone from the audit team, will reach out to the points of contact that are listed on the grant award documentation. They're going to reach out to you. It could be via email, it could be a phone call, and they are going to introduce themselves. They'll provide a little bit of information about the OIG, some information about the audit that they are looking to initiate, and they're really going to work with you to try and schedule what's called an entrance conference with you and your team. So following that call or that email that you'll receive from the auditor in charge, you're going to receive a written notification that initiates the audit. That initiation letter is going to include information about the audit. This will include the date of the scheduled entrance conference. It will request some preliminary documentation that you will need to provide electronically to the team, and it'll go over the objective and scope of the audit. Again, this will be written and it will be provided to everyone associated with that audit. So then we have what's called the audit process. That part of that audit process is going to involve an entrance conference and field work and the report. The goal of this entire audit process is to prepare an audit report. That audit report is going to go to OVW on the grants that were awarded to you as the recipient. The audit process is going to include the fieldwork, report writing, and resolution. And the fieldwork phase officially begins with the entrance conference. Now, at the entrance conference, the audit team is going to go over information similar to what we are going to discuss here today. They're going to tell you the information about the OIG, the objective, scope, and methodology of the audit that was included in that initiation letter. And they're going to work to iron out some logistics of completing the audit fieldwork. They'll let you know during that phase who your point of contacts are and who to reach out to with any questions. Following that entrance conference, the audit work officially begins. And I just want to note, there could be a possibility that this work is done entirely in person. It could be done entirely remotely, or it could be a combination of both. A lot of that will depend on logistics. It could be the type of documentation or the audit that is planned. And it could be just a matter of communication and availability of the audit staff and those that we are auditing. I'm going to discuss the different sides of this audit fieldwork in the next slides, but first I just want to say that this fieldwork is divided into two sections. We have the programmatic review, and then we have the financial review. So Elizabeth, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So first, we're going to discuss the programmatic review. So what are we going to do during this phase of the audit work? So generally, the auditors are going to reach out and schedule interviews with relevant officials. Generally, these interviews are to understand processes in place. The audit staff does not pretend to be subject matter experts at your job and what you do. So we do try our best to understand the work that is being done, and we ask clarifying questions along the way. Teams are then going to review the award document. They're going to look at the program narratives, the progress reports, anything that'll help the audit team gain an understanding of the program, its goals and objectives, and how that work is progressing along. They'll review the accomplishments of the program, and they will likely request supporting documentation that backs up any of the information that you've reported. We're really interested in hearing about the work that you've done with those award funds. We are also going to review and sample a handful of special conditions to ensure compliance. Those special conditions could be as simple as gathering evidence that a training was completed, or it could be something that you have developed and implemented required policies and procedures. So I'm going to move over to the financial side, Elizabeth, if you don't mind. So now we have the financial review. And in the financial review, we determine if costs charged to the award were allowable, supported, and properly allocated. Very much similar to the programmatic side, we are going to interview relevant officials. We are going to ask them to walk us through financial processes in place. And some of these things that we're going to look at is the financial management system. Some of the questions you may get asked are, what does your accounting system look like? What are its capabilities? How are you tracking federal funds? Who can access this system? So it could be a great number of questions, but we generally have to get an understanding of what it is that you have in place to secure these federal funds. Then we look at something like internal controls. And again, it boils down to processes. Do you have processes in place? Are they written down? If you were to leave your agency one day, would someone be able to pick up where you left off? We look at drawdowns. We ask what the process is for drawdowns. How are you ensuring that there is not excess cash on hand? Again, this all deals with processes and procedures that you have in place. For budget management, how are you ensuring that you're spending within those approved categories? And if you do need to change those, are you asking for appropriate modifications from your grant manager? Reporting. Who is responsible for reporting information? Do you maintain supporting documentation? Are you reviewing that? Are you spot checking this information? And is your data accurate? So again, we'll be going through a lot of questions, most of them via interview, to get an understanding of what's going on with the financial aspects of your program. I would say the largest chunk of the financial review, however, has to do with the award expenditures. The team is going to select and test a sample of transactions that are paid for with grant funds to ensure that they are allowable, supported, and properly allocated. The team is going to give you ample time to pull these transactions and all of the supporting documentation they may need. And depending on the program, the team will also, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, the next slide, jumping ahead. And depending on the program that you have, the team may also review the monitoring of grant award partners, which include subrecipients, contractors, or other partners. So again, we are going to assess certain things and requirements that are associated with having a subrecipient, a contractor, or other partners. Policies on redistributing award funds. How are you selecting subrecipients? How are you selecting your contractors and consultants? We are going to be reviewing the agreements with outside entities that you have in place. Do you have sufficient information that is required in those award documents? Do you have information about procurement and how you're selecting these contracts or consultants? We are going to look at a list of monitoring activities that you have in place to ensure that you are reviewing the work of these outside entities, partners, and subrecipients. We are going to look at support for payments. So if you're awarding funds to a subrecipient contractor or other partner, we're going to ensure similarly that they are allowable and supported. And we also want to make sure that they are accomplishing what they are set to accomplish using the award funds. So there's a lot there in terms of the work that we are doing in the field, but all along the way, your auditors are going to provide you with feedback. You are going to be able to understand the preliminary results. Our true goal is for you to have no surprises in this process. Anything that comes to us as a concern, we are going to bring it to your attention immediately. In some circumstances, you are able to address that concern immediately and will be able to incorporate that into our audit report. So anytime there is a miscommunication or something that we don't understand, we ask that you bring it to our attention. Oftentimes, our auditors will make sure that they have an understanding and they'll say, is this correct? Is this understanding correct? We really do try to make sure that we are on the same page. But all of this, everyone can't be perfect all the time and issues do come up. So then we kind of have to figure out then what? What happens when the OIG does identify an issue? So Elizabeth, if you don't mind going to the next page. So yes, so there are findings and recommendations. There are instances where we have reason to believe that there was non-compliance and we do have to make a finding and a recommendation. So what is a finding? Well, a finding is a result of the audit work completed by an auditor. A finding may involve deficiencies with an internal control. It could be non-compliance with laws, regulations, and a grant agreement. All these findings that are developed by an auditor will contain 4 essential elements. They're the condition, criteria, cause, and effect. The criteria is the laws, the guidelines, a contract, the award agreements, or any measures that establish what is required. The condition is the statement of what is, and that's the situation that exists. That is what the auditor found. The cause is, why did this happen? If there is something that occurred during your audit, why? And the effect will answer, so what? So now that we found this, what impact does it ultimately have? We use these elements to tell the story of what happened in the audit report and why we've derived at the recommendation that we have. We do have 2 different types of recommendations. One of them is a management improvement recommendation, and the other are dollar-related recommendation. Both types of these recommendations are written to the awarding agency to assist with the award recipient. I'm going to go over a little bit of the types of these management improvement recommendations before we go into the dollar-related recommendations. So an example, and I would say a simple example of having a management improvement recommendation could be that we found that an auditee consistently submitted their required reports late. And therefore, our recommendation would be that OVW or the awarding agency would work with the auditee to ensure timely submission of reports. In that audit report, we would identify the criteria or the area of noncompliance, and we would say the effect of what happens if you don't submit reports in a timely manner. There could be a number of findings related to management improvement, but the ultimate goal is to make you improve your program, improve your processes, and to hopefully benefit the program as a whole. The management improvement findings that we have are not prescriptive. They don't tell the auditee exactly how to complete or execute the recommendation. We do give the auditee some latitude to determine what will work best for their program, but ultimately we are ensuring compliance with the criteria. You can move to the next slide, Elizabeth. So the second type of finding is a dollar-related finding, and dollar-related findings involve money, and they fall into 2 different categories. So the first category is funds to better use. And if there is a dollar-related finding for funds to better use, that essentially means that we have determined that unspent funding should not be used as planned. We also have question costs. And that means that we have determined that there was a problem with how money was spent. If a cost is determined to be unallowable, it means that the cost violated a law, regulation, grant award, or approved budget. If a cost is determined to be unsupported, it means that the cost lacks sufficient appropriate evidence or documentation, such as invoices for goods and services or timesheets for personnel charges. For unreasonable costs, we generally use the question, would a prudent person, given the circumstances, have used the money in this manner? And for unnecessary costs, we determine whether or not the expense bears a logical relationship to the grant and its program. More often than not in our reports, you see that there are unallowable or unsupported costs. And again, if we find something that is unsupported, there could be a likelihood that you find a document or can provide something to the audit team, and that would help in something related to the dollar-related findings. And that gets me into people asking the question, okay, wow, you found all of this money and all of these dollar-related question costs. Do I have to repay all of that? How does that work? Well, there are 4 different ways to remedy recommendations that are question costs. There is an offset, a waiver, recovery of funds, and the ability to provide additional supporting documentation. So if we ask that there is an offset, that means you're going to make up the work that was not done in the past and into the future. For a waiver, OJP is going to retroactively approve an action. And for recovery of funds, there would be a repayment of those question costs, or it would be asked to deobligate any of the unspent grant funds. Kind of in the situation I just alluded to earlier, if you were able to locate documentation that would support something that we found was unsupported, for instance, if we had a timesheet that we couldn't locate, but you were able to locate that timesheet at a later date and you could provide it to us, that would demonstrate that corrective action had been taken, and we'd be able to address that question cost accordingly. So while I know it could be a little bit scary when you see a dollar amount associated with something in your audit report, there are various methods to remedy those question costs. And you do have a team of individuals that are working with you at your awarding agency at OVW that will work with you through this process. But again, throughout this entire audit fieldwork phase, we are letting you know upfront any concerns that we identify so you're able to address it head on. Elizabeth is going to discuss the next phase as it gets to the exit conference. But again, the biggest goal here is that by the time you reach that exit conference, everything that is discussed with you is not a surprise. So I'll pass it to Elizabeth to go through the final stages of the audit process.
All right, thanks, Marie. To reiterate exactly what Marie just said, I think that one of the big goals of the audit team is to make sure that there is transparency and communication throughout the audit. So again, when we get to the exit conference, we are hopeful that you are not hearing any of the information for the first time, that you are aware of the findings and the proposed recommended actions to take. But we do like to have an official exit conference where we invite individuals from your organization as well as from OVW to discuss the findings that we identified, if any, during the audit, as well as the recommendations. Subsequent to the exit conference, we will issue a draft report. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's our audit report, but it is in draft status. So it does not mean that it is the final report that will be published. We issue it to your organization and to OVW to have a chance to look at it, digest the information, let us know if there are any technical comments, if there's anything that we might have gotten wrong, but also to respond to this report. So the first step is that the award recipient will respond to the draft report. And what this looks like is that for each recommendation, we are looking for you to respond to how you will take corrective action to address that recommendation. So we're looking for if you have any sort of processes that you're going to improve, or you plan to write a new policy, or you are going to look to see if you have any supporting documentation, we're looking for that all to be addressed within that response to the draft report. After the award recipient responds, the awarding agency has a chance to respond. So then OVW will look at the recipient's response. We'll also look at the report, and then OVW will prepare their response to the report as well, stating whether or not they agree or concur with the recommendations and with the information that the awarding agency provided in their response. And then finally, there is what we call a management representation letter. So this is a letter that we require every award recipient to complete. And it basically states that all the information provided to the audit team during the course of the audit, whether that was in an interview, in a meeting, any documentation that was provided via email or hard copy, that all of that is as accurate and complete as the award recipient believes that it is. So it's just attesting to the fact that you have provided all of the information that we were looking for, and you provided it in as complete of a form as possible. So subsequent to the exit conference, and we received the responses to the draft report, we will issue our final report. So once the audit team receives those responses, we take them and compile them, and then we provide our analysis appendix. It's our analysis and summary of actions necessary to close the report. So we will look at the responses, and then we will summarize the actions taken, and then what we as the OIG will be looking for in order to close out those recommendations. We will put all that together into our final report package. So this will include our final audit report, and then in appendices after the report, there will be the award recipient response, the awarding agency response, and then our analysis. So all of this will be in the final report package. That will be sent to your agency and to OVW. And then the following day, it will be posted publicly on our OIG website. All right, so then what happens from here after the report is made public? So every 6 months, we require that OVW sends us a status on the recommendations and the actions that have been taken at that time to close the recommendations. There are 3 statuses of recommendations. Resolved is that OVW has agreed to implement the recommendation or has proposed actions that will address the recommendation. I would say that the majority of recommendations are in resolved status upon issuance of the final report. And that means that we are working, we all agree that there is recommended actions that need to be taken, and we're working towards those. Unresolved means that there is not agreement on the implementation of the recommendation, and that there has not been sufficient progress made towards implementing it. That doesn't happen often, but it does sometimes happen. We try to avoid that. We try to work with you all so that we are issuing any recommendations in resolved status. And then finally, there's a closed status, which is what everybody loves to see. That means that the award recipient and OVW have come to an agreement that the actions necessary have been met. The OIG reviews the information, agrees, and then we can, all corrective actions have been completed, and we close the recommendation. So as I mentioned, all of our final reports are on our website. You can view that here at oig.justice.gov. You can see all the reports that we have issued going back, many, many years. On our website, you'll also find a grant webinar. So similar to the information that we are conveying to you now, if there's something that we have that's permanently posted on our website that walks you through the grant audit process.
I wanted to jump in too, because I think one of the things that I didn't mention, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, is how long is this going to take, right? How long does an audit take from this whole process from start to finish? And I'd love to tell you that there is an actual answer to that, but we can give you an approximation. So generally for these external audits that we have, it could take anywhere from 6 to 9 months up to a year if needed. But that doesn't mean we are going to be in your face for 6 to 9 months. Generally, that audit fieldwork phase that we discuss can take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks max, mostly. And sometimes it's been even less, where we've only been on site for 1 or 2 days, depending on the work that we need to complete on site. And that has a lot to do with the technology that we have now, where we can complete interviews remotely or virtually and then go on site for transaction testing or reviewing any sample. But we will be in contact with you during that period of time, but again, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are in your space. We do not want to interrupt any sort of program or operations. We try. No one likes to see us. We get it. We're auditors. But at the same we have a job to get done as much as you have a job to get done. So we don't want to disrupt your operations or any programs. So we try to be as least disruptive as possible. So I'm sorry, I know, Elizabeth, you were going to open it up to questions, but I kept thinking, I was like, people are probably going to think, how long is this going to take? So I just wanted to put that out there preemptively.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you for addressing that. So we do want to open it up now for questions. I do see that there are a few. I'll address the first one, and I think it actually appears twice, is how do we determine which programs or entities or organizations to audit? And that is a fantastic question, probably on most of your minds, thinking when or how will this happen to me? And so there are lots of different factors to go into our decision to audit a certain entity. I'll cover just a few of them. It might be that OVW or somebody within the department has identified your organization as one that might be on a high risk list, or there might be some things going on in their communication with you that might put, their little feelers up and make them think that, oh, this might be an entity to go look at. It might have to do with any prior audit findings. If any of your organizations have undergone a single audit that might have had findings, or another type of review that might lead us to believe that you might be that grant program might be something for us to go look at. Sometimes it's just if there's a high dollar amount, we might want to go look to see if there are more funds awarded to a certain organization than another. Sometimes it does come down to geography. If we think, oh, it's been a really long time since we've been to, I don't mean to pick on a certain state, but I'm going to pick on Illinois since that's where I'm from. It's been a long time since we've audited somewhere in Illinois. Maybe we should go take a look at something in Illinois. Yeah, it really can be just a lot of different factors, but they're definitely, we're not choosing at random. I'll say that there are usually some factors that have come to our attention that we put into our decision making. I don't know, Marie, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, no, I think that really covered it. And obviously, again, your audit team, when they kind of cold call you in the beginning, they can give you some information about why you were selected or why they're interested in initiating that audit. So it's always good to ask that question if you are subject of an audit, just to get that information, but they will be transparent as to why your specific organization or entity was selected. I think I see other questions, and I know it's kind of the elephant in the room related to the executive orders and OMB memo. And unfortunately, we don't have any additional information about the impact and how that's going to be received more than anyone else. We are kind of taking this one step at a time based on the information that we're provided. So unfortunately, any questions that are related to the executive orders or the OMB memo about grant funds being frozen, we unfortunately don't have any additional information, but we would ask that if you do, you can contact your grant manager from OVW with specific questions. Trying to see what else we have, Elizabeth.
Yeah, there's a few questions about whether or not this has been recorded, and I believe it has been, but I would direct any of those questions to Mackenzie and about tracking attendance and things like that as well. Does anyone have any other questions?
We'll keep looking in the question and answer. But again, we don't want to inundate people with the information, but we do know that anytime, again, that an audit is initiated, the auditors, the audit team will keep you informed of this process that we discussed. And we do encourage you to look at that webinar that is on the OIG page to give you an even more in-depth look at this audit process than what we provided to you today. Again, you're working with individuals that have experience working with these types of grants. They are familiar with the criteria that is required. And again, it just boils down to compliance and helping your organization ensure compliance with those requirements and laws. But oh, I see questions.
Yep. So I see a question about whether or not everyone who received a grant in this cycle will be audited, and the question is no. We do not have enough resources to audit everybody, nor do I think everybody wants to be audited. As Marie said, nobody likes to see us showing up. So no, not everyone will be audited. It is a condition of the grant that you are, there's the possibility that you will be audited at any time. But we are not able to audit everybody.
And I believe somebody asked to go over the elements of a finding again, and I'm happy to do so. And again, essentially, the audit report is the story of that finding. For us as auditors, we're easy to pick out in an audit report the condition, criteria, cause, and effect in that report. And kind of the rest of the words are window dressing, I would say. But again, the meat of the report, those findings are the condition, criteria, cause, and effect. So that criteria is the laws that govern the guidelines, the contracts, the award agreements, special conditions, whatever it is that establishes what is required. So that would be the criteria. That is what we are auditing against. We have these rules that you're asked to, required to follow, and we want to make sure we're ensuring compliance. So the criteria is, again, what establishes what is required. The condition is always going to be what is. It's what we found. So it's the statement of fact. Reports were submitted late, or whatever the case may be in the certain situation, it's what is, what we found. The cause is going to be why. We want to figure out why this happened. Your reports were submitted late. Why? Because that position has been vacant for 4 years and no one's been submitting it timely. It could be a very number of causes to why something would happen. There's no policies and procedures in place. We didn't realize who was responsible for reporting, or et cetera, et cetera. And then the effect is, so what? So what happens if you don't have reports issued timely? That could impact OVW and what they're required to report. It could impact the program overall. So again, each of those findings that we have the condition, criteria, cause, and effect. And it is very important that we make that clear within the report so you understand where we're coming from and why it is important to ensure compliance with that requirement or law.
Thanks, Marie. I see another question about supporting documentation. So the question is, what backup is required when timesheets are not done, but are ADP driven, such as a payroll register? So I can answer that for you. So when we're reviewing supporting documentation for payroll expenses, the first step that we do is we look at what controls your organization has in place for recording time. Because you are correct that a timesheet is not a requirement, and we know that not every organization uses a timesheet. Some organizations might just use a time clock, punch in, punch out. Some, if all their employees are salaried, they might not use anything. They might keep an activity log of the activities that they've done. I've seen some organizations where they just have a position description in it, and they have their employees sign that this is my position description with my duties and responsibilities, and this is what I do. I've also seen signature pages attesting to a breakdown of time where somebody says, I spend 50% of my time on the grant and I spend 50% of my time on X, Y, or Z, and I'm attesting to that every 6 months or whatever time frame it is. But what we're looking for is that whatever process your organization has in place, first, that it's documented in your policy and procedure, so that we can see that everybody in the organization understands the process, they know what they need to follow, and then if anybody were to leave at any time, the process will still remain, and there can be a continuity of operations. And then second, we look at whether or not what you have actually executed, so what is happening, matches your process. So if you say that you're going to have employees sign a sheet every 6 months that say that they work 50% on the grant, is that actually happening? have you done that? And then do you have that supporting documentation for us? So can we see those signature pages? Or if you require an activity log, can we see those logs? If you have a time card system where it's punch in, punch out, can we get a log of those? What we're looking for is just, have you executed what your policy and your controls say that you're going to execute? So correct that timesheets are not required, but if you do require timesheets, if your policy says that you will have all your staff fill out timesheets, then we would be looking for those timesheets. That was a good question. Thank you.
And we did put our contact information in that slide in front of you, and we are happy to answer questions. If you don't have them right now, please feel free to reach out to us with these questions. A lot of it happens when you're in it, right? So if you are in the midst of an audit, you're likely going to have these questions, and you are going to be paired up with an audit team that's going to answer those questions for you. So again, while we went through this process, and while it is somewhat overwhelming, and it's probably overwhelming in the moment as well, we're going to have people around you that are going to be willing to assist you answering questions that you have and clarify anything. So I'll keep looking.
Yeah,
If we have
I
questions.
see one more. It says we
Okay.
use an electronic time system and they have a percentage of what they're working on, and then the payroll report shows that. Is that okay? We do not use a paper timesheet. So without seeing specifically what you're talking about, but in generalization, that sounds fine. Again, we would need the process to be documented in policy and procedure, and just that whatever is documented then matches what your policy and procedure says. So again, from this question, that sounds okay in theory. We would have to see the actual documents whether or not to say that it is, but yes, as long as you have controls in place to make sure that you're, tracking the time in a certain way, tracking the allocation in a certain way, that would be fine.
And I did see in the chat someone asking about supporting documentation for FFRs. For all of these aspects of the program, drawdowns, FFRs, we do look for supporting documentation for FFRs, what was reported, making sure those numbers reconcile with your accounting records. So again, as much evidence and documentation you can provide the team would be really helpful. A lot of people we found to do these best practices where they submit something, they keep a file of the supporting documentation that they used or whatever it was to support a report or an FFR or anything that was submitted. And that's really helpful when it comes to an audit, just so that you have all of that support and documentation readily available for an auditor to review. So again, when it comes to that initiation memo that I had mentioned all the way in the beginning of this presentation, we kind of refer to it as the laundry list, but there is a little bit of a laundry list of documentation that we request. It includes past audits, if you have a single audit, any previous reviews by anyone else. We kind of want to review that, but we do ask for your general ledger, your accounting records. We ask for some of this support for progress reports that you may submit. So we do hope that organizations are keeping and maintaining this documentation. So obviously it helps you to refresh your memory or to, take a snapshot in time. But obviously when we come into audit, because an audit really is a snapshot in time, that you have that documentation available for us to review. So again, it could be a various number of things, but we always encourage people. I think the big ones are written policies and procedures, and maintaining supporting documentation, and obviously having a robust accounting system that can account for these federal funds.
Yeah, and I think for that question, it says, are the supporting documentation to be submitted with the FFR? So if that is referring to when you submit your quarterly FFR to OVW, I do not believe there is any supporting documentation that needs to be submitted with the actual FFR, right, Marie?
Yeah.
Right. There's no supporting documentation at that time when you submit it to OVW. But to Marie's point, during an audit, and for us to assess the accuracy of the figures that are reported on the FFR, we would be looking for supporting documentation during the audit process. I do see another question in the Q&A. It says, so I have to have a policy on how we clock in and clock out electronically. And so I would say that yes, but that policy might just be the manual for your time card system. I'm thinking of a punch clock. I recently did an audit of a entity that used a punch clock. And what they provided to us was their user manual, which is what they provided to their staff. So their staff had the user manual. The staff knew how they had to clock in and clock out. And so that was the policy for the actual process of clocking in and clocking out. What we would be looking for, though, is for when you are doing your payroll, that you have somewhere documented that, all right, I'm going to take the reports that come from my time clock system, and then I'm going to, allocate them a certain way, or just how you're going to then, put them into your accounting records.
Right. But again, like those written policies and procedures, you'll hear the auditors ask for them repeatedly. We kind of like to use the example, if you were to win the lottery and leave the organization the next day, would someone be able to come in and continue operations and know what to do if you vacated your position? And sometimes that speaks to SOPs, the standard operating procedures that you have in place at your organization to continue the operations. And some of them are as simple as an accounting manual, a financial manual, a user guide, or whatever guidance it is that you're providing to the individuals that work in the program or support the program, so they can continue those operations, and that we can kind of follow as an auditor the operations that you have in place. Let's see what else. Feel free to ask. Doesn't matter. We're here to answer. We may not know all of the answers, but we're happy to answer any of the questions. I'll just give you guys a few more minutes because I think we've done most of the questions that are in here. Well, Elizabeth, anything else on your end? I'm trying to look through the chat to see if there was anything dropped in there.
Yeah, I don't see anything else either. I would just say, as Marie mentioned, as you'll see on the slide, we have our email addresses there. And please don't hesitate ever to reach out if you have a question. And don't think you'd be the first one to do so. I have received questions before from grantees, and our approach really is that we're here to help. I mean, we're all here to be good stewards of these funds and to make sure that the funds are meeting their intended purposes. I know that you all do really, really amazing work. It's one of the pleasures for us as auditors is that we get to go and see all the work that's being done across the country, and it really is eye-opening and impressive to see all of this work. So we're here to help your programs run efficiently and effectively as well. So really, really happy to answer any questions at any time, or just any support you need. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, great job. One last thing, I'm putting the link to the orientations page for everybody. That's where the recordings will be posted. Just give us a little bit of time to be able to get this one up. But great job. Congratulations, everybody. All done with the office wides.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Have a great afternoon.